Camille always noticed the way the fluorescent lights hummed above her desk, soft, persistent, almost like a thought she kept trying to ignore. Every morning when she arrived before everyone else, the office was still half dark, the city barely awake, and that hum filled the silence like a secret she didn't dare name. At 22, she had already mastered the art of pretending things didn't bother her, of smoothing over the rough edges of her own confusion. But the hum, it always found a way to slip in, vibrating just enough to unsettle her. It reminded her of something she'd buried long before she could understand it, a version of herself she was still afraid to meet. She slid into her chair, fingers brushing the cool edge of her keyboard. The early winter light seeped through the tall windows, thin, silver, hesitant, like someone knocking softly on a door. Camille had always been a quiet presence. Small frame, soft brown hair tied in a careful low ponytail, eyes warm but guarded, as if every thought had to pass through 3 layers of permission before reaching the surface. She dressed in neutrals, cardigans that hid her shoulders, jeans that didn't call attention. She liked being the background of her own life. Backgrounds didn't get questioned. She was staring at the light on her desk when she heard footsteps. Light, rhythmic, the kind of walk that belonged to someone who didn't need to announce her presence to be noticed. Camille straightened instinctively before she even turned. June, 26 years old, taller than Camille by a few inches, with a kind of quiet charisma that felt like gravity. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun that somehow looked intentional, a few loose strands brushing the line of her jaw. She wore an oversized navy coat she never bothered to button, and smelled faintly of warm cedar and something like orange peel. Her voice, when she spoke, held a low, natural confidence, the kind that made people lean in without realizing. "You're here early again," June said, setting her tote on the desk across from Camille's. Camille felt her pulse shift, one beat stuttering before falling back into place. "Just trying to get ahead of things." June smiled, slow and warm, the kind of smile that stretched into her eyes. "You always are." A flicker of heat rose along Camille's neck. She didn't know why June's presence unsettled her more than anyone else's. Maybe it was the way June looked at her, as if she saw not just the surface Camille so carefully curated, but the cracks beneath it. Maybe it was the tiny moments Camille couldn't forget, even when she tried. The shared elevator rides, the laughter lingering in air, the way June's voice softened slightly when talking only to her. June sat down, brushing frost from her coat sleeve, and Camille tried to focus on her monitor. But there was a shift in the air, like the office lights had dimmed, or the hum had changed pitch. She could feel the warmth of June's presence across the narrow aisle, the awareness slipping under her skin in a way she couldn't rationalize. Another small coincidence, another thread woven between them. Camille reached for her coffee just as June reached for hers, their movements mirroring each other with an almost choreographed synchronicity. They both paused, then laughed quietly, June's laugh bright and melodic, Camille's softer, almost shy. Camille tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Guess it's going to be one of those days. The synchronized kind," June teased. "Something like that." A moment passed, filled with the faint clatter of someone dropping a folder at the far end of the office. June tapped her pen absently on her notebook, eyes drifting toward Camille's desk and lingering. Camille felt the weight of the glance, not heavy, just present, like a hand resting near hers on a table but not touching. She pretended to read an email that wasn't open. The morning unfolded with those tiny, impossible-to-explain shifts. When June leaned over to ask about the new campaign, Camille caught the gentle scent of her shampoo, something clean and citrusy, and that simple, mundane detail made her chest tighten. When June laughed at a meme someone sent on Slack, Camille found herself smiling at the sound alone, not even knowing what the joke was. And when June brushed a loose curl away from her own face, Camille had to look away, afraid of what her eyes might betray. Around midday they ended up at the break room at the same time, another coincidence that didn't feel like one. Camille opened the fridge, reaching for her lunch, when June stepped beside her to grab a drink. Their shoulders almost touched. Camille felt a tiny rush of warmth along her arm, as if her skin remembered something her mind refused to admit. June glanced at her. "You okay?" It wasn't the question that caught Camille, it was the tone. Curious. Like June wasn't asking about her day, but about something deeper Camille thought she hid well. "Yeah," Camille said quickly. "Just tired." June studied her a moment longer, her eyes searching but kind. "If you say so." Camille's breath faltered. That look. It felt too close to something she didn't have words for. Something she wasn't ready to claim. They returned to their desks. The winter light had changed again, becoming warmer now, angling across the office floor in soft amber stripes. Camille watched it for a second. How it illuminated dust in the air, how it made June's hair glow in subtle gold when she leaned toward her screen. Another micro moment. June murmured something to herself, adjusting her glasses, and Camille found her eyes drifting toward her, longer than she should have. And in the same instant June looked up. Their gazes collided like two truths meeting halfway. Camille froze. June didn't. Her lips parted as if she were about to say something. Something she hadn't planned, something unguarded. Camille's heart thudded, a quick, startled sound against her ribs. June tilted her head slightly, a question in her expression, a softness that felt like an unfinished sentence. But before either of them broke the silence, someone from HR called June's name across the room. June blinked, almost reluctantly, and looked away. Camille exhaled only when she was sure June couldn't hear it. An exhale edged with relief and something dangerously close to disappointment. As the afternoon settled around them, the hum of the office returned to its usual constancy. But for the first time it didn't drown out Camille's thoughts. It amplified them. And when June passed by her desk moments later, brushing close enough that Camille felt the shift of air, June paused, just a fraction, like she'd meant to say something. But she didn't. And Camille didn't either. The almost whatever it was hung between them, suspended, waiting. The next morning began with the kind of cold that seeped through windows and settled into the bones of the building, turning every surface a little sharper, every breath a little more visible. Camille arrived at the office wrapped in a wool scarf, fingers stiff from the wind, cheeks tinged with winter pink. She set her bag down and rubbed her palms together, trying to chase away the lingering chill. June walked in not long after, carrying 2 coffees instead of 1. "They messed up my order and gave me an extra," she said, placing a cup on Camille's desk without waiting for permission. "Thought you might want it." The lie was obvious but gentle. No one accidentally orders an extra vanilla oat latte with 1 pump of caramel. The exact drink Camille always got but never announced out loud. She felt her breath catch, a small, startled inhale. "Thank you," she said, fingers brushing the warm paper cup. The heat spread through her hands almost instantly, grounding her. "You didn't have to." June shrugged, the corner of her mouth curving. "Maybe I wanted to." A pulse of warmth rippled under Camille's skin, tightening something low in her stomach. She looked away, pretending to be fascinated by a stack of documents. But she could still feel June's eyes on her, lingering just long enough to blur the edges of the moment. Later that morning their team gathered for a briefing. The office lights were harsh, humming louder today, and the conference room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fresh printouts. June sat beside Camille, closer than she needed to, her coat draped over the back of the chair, the sleeve brushing Camille's knee. The air between them held a soft static. The meeting was about an upcoming client event in New York. Travel, deadlines, late-night work sessions. Stress for everyone. As the project manager outlined tasks, June nudged Camille with her shoulder, whispering, "Looks like we're getting drafted into the same assignment." Camille glanced at the schedule. They were paired for the main presentation materials. "I guess so. You sound thrilled," June teased under her breath. Camille gave a tight smile, though her heart was thudding a little harder. Working all week with June? Sharing late hours? Small hotel rooms in Manhattan? The thought both excited and terrified her. When the meeting ended, June slung her tote over her shoulder and murmured, "Want to grab lunch? Just us. I know a place near the river." Camille hesitated only long enough for it to count. "Hey." The walk to the cafe was quiet at first, cold air brushing their faces, the crunch of thin ice beneath their boots. Camille watched the way sunlight caught on June's earrings, the tiny silver hoops swaying when she turned her head. June kept her hands in her coat pockets, shoulders relaxed despite the wind. The cafe was small and warm, filled with the smell of rosemary bread and roasted tomatoes. They sat by the window, their table barely big enough for 2 plates. Their knees brushed a few times, accidentally on purpose, and Camille felt each touch like a small spark climbing up her leg. "Do you ever think about leaving Boston?" June asked, stirring her soup. "Somewhere warmer. Or louder. Or quieter. Depends on the day." Camille bit into her sandwich, thinking, "I don't know. I've never really imagined myself anywhere else. You should, June said softly. Sometimes the version of us we like best exists somewhere we haven't gone yet. Camille looked up, surprised by the tenderness in the statement. Their eyes met across the small table. Something unspoken drifted between them, warm as steam rising from their plates. Camille looked down first. In the afternoon, the office buzzed with pre-event chaos. People rushed from desk to desk. Emails piled up. The hum of printers and voices filled the air. Camille tried to focus on slide layouts, but every time June leaned over her shoulder to look at the screen, Camille's breath tangled. She felt the warmth of June's body, the faint scent of cedar and something floral, and her pulse stuttered like an uneven melody. The spacing here looks off, June murmured, reaching for the mouse. Her fingers brushed Camille's. A brief, electric touch. Camille froze. June didn't move her hand immediately. Just kept it there, their skin almost joined, the air thickening between them. Sorry, June said finally, voice low. But her eyes held no apology, only a question Camille wasn't brave enough to answer. By early evening, most of the team had left. Only a handful of lights remained on, casting a soft amber haze across the floor. Camille was gathering her things when the office manager called out. Camille, you'll need to deliver the prototypes downtown tonight. They need them before morning. Camille's stomach sank. That meant commuting alone in the cold, carrying fragile boards through half-frozen sidewalks. Before she could agree or refuse, June stepped forward. I'll drive her. The words came so naturally it seemed rehearsed. Camille blinked, startled. June turned to her, offering a small, steady smile. Come on. It's not safe to walk that far with all that stuff. They rode in June's old Subaru, the heater blowing warm air around them, fogging the windows slightly. Music played low, soft guitar, something indie and comforting. Camille watched the city blur outside, streetlights streaking like watercolor. June drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on her thigh, tapping gently to the rhythm. When they arrived downtown, Camille stepped out first. The air smelled of concrete, rain-soaked pavement and distant car exhaust. June helped her carry the boards to the small lobby, their hands brushing again, this time more deliberately. On the way back to the car, Camille's foot slipped slightly on a patch of wet tile. June caught her elbow. Firm, warm, steady. Hey, June murmured. I've got you. The touch lingered longer than it needed to. A breath too long. A heartbeat too vulnerable. They stood there for a moment, city lights painting faint gold on June's cheekbones, the air between them colder than their skin. Camille's heart hammered. June's thumb brushed once, barely there, against Camille's sleeve. A gesture so small yet so intimate it felt like the world had narrowed to that single point of contact. Their faces were only a breath apart. June's eyes softened. Camille's lips parted instinctively. The moment tilted. But then a car honked loudly around the corner, snapping the fragile tension. They stepped apart, both pretending they hadn't leaned in, hadn't almost crossed a line neither of them had named yet. Back in the car, the silence felt charged, warmer than before. Camille's hands trembled slightly in her lap and June noticed. Of course she noticed. Tomorrow, June said quietly, eyes on the road. We'll have more time. After the prep. If you want. Camille swallowed. Hope, fear, wanting all tangled. Yeah. Tomorrow. The promise hung between them, fragile and glowing. A promise neither of them dared interpret out loud. The day of the New York event arrived with the kind of bright, icy morning that made the whole city feel like a breath held too long. Camille sat in the back of the car the company had rented for the team, her hands knotted together, her eyes fixed on the skyline as they crossed the bridge. June sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed whenever the car hit a bump. Neither moved away. The hotel was warm, filled with the scent of polished wood and soft citrus. The lobby lighting glowed in soft gold, catching in June's hair as she checked them in. Camille found herself staring at the curve of June's jaw, the delicate line of her neck, the way her fingers tapped lightly on the counter as she spoke with the receptionist. A wave of warmth ran through her, unexpected and strong. 2 rooms, but on the same floor, please, June said. Camille's breath loosened somewhere deep in her chest. Something about the phrasing, gentle, intentional, made her knees feel unsteady. As they rode the elevator up, a subtle shift of weight pressed June's shoulder closer to Camille's. The small metal space filled with their breaths, their warmth, something electric simmering beneath the silence. June's voice was soft. You okay? Camille nodded, but June's eyes knew better. They always did. If you need anything, June started. I know, Camille whispered back so quietly June leaned closer to hear. Their rooms ended up side by side, separated by a thin patterned wall and two identical wooden doors. Camille felt June's presence even after they stepped into their own spaces, as if her warmth lingered in the air, in the carpet, in the way the hallway light glowed. The afternoon was a blur of meetings, set-up, rehearsals. The event hall buzzed with activity. The smell of fresh paint from the displays, the low hum of speakers being tested, the cold draft from workers passing through large metal doors. Camille moved through it nervously, her mind caught somewhere between work and the magnetic pull of June's nearness. June noticed every small shift in Camille's breathing. You're overthinking again, she murmured while holding a sample board steady. I'm not. You are. The moment stretched. June's fingers brushed Camille's wrist as she passed her the next board. A small, feather-light touch. Intentional. Careful. Asking without forcing. Camille didn't pull back. By early evening, the room was empty except for them. The others had gone to dinner. Deadlines were met. The hall lights dimmed to a warm dusk-like glow. June sat on the floor with her laptop, legs crossed, hair falling loose around her cheeks. Camille sat beside her, back leaning against a large display, exhaustion and something deeper settling between them like soft fabric. I ordered food, June said, nudging Camille's foot lightly. Real food. Not granola bars and anxiety. Camille laughed, the sound small but real. What did you get? Pasta. Salad. Something chocolate because you always want something sweet after dinner. Camille blinked. How do you know that? June raised an eyebrow. Because I pay attention. The simple admission sent a warmth spiraling through Camille's chest. They ate on the floor, sharing forks, sitting close enough for their knees to touch. The soft hum of heaters filled the silence. The smell of basil and garlic clung to the air. Camille wiped a smear of sauce from her lip, and June's eyes followed the motion too carefully. Camille noticed, and swallowed hard. What? She asked quietly. June shook her head, voice softer than usual. Nothing. Just you. The words hit Camille like a soft blow. Unexpected, honest, unguarded. A heat rose under her skin, her pulse quickening. She looked away, but June reached out gently, her fingertips brushing Camille's forearm. Pause. A question. A silent, "May I?" Camille didn't move. Didn't breathe. June's touch slid down slowly, stopping just above Camille's wrist. The warmth of her hand seeped through the fabric of Camille's sleeve. There was no urgency, only patience, gentle, attentive. Their breaths synced without trying. They stayed like that for a moment that felt suspended, held between stillness and something fragile. Camille lifted her head and their eyes locked. June's gaze flickered, hope, fear, wanting. Camille's lips parted on instinct. June whispered, "Camille." The sound of her name on June's lips felt like a touch. Camille leaned in a fraction. June inhaled softly. Their noses almost brushed. The world narrowed to the warmth between them, the faint citrus scent of June's skin, the way Camille's heart stumbled painfully in her chest. Their foreheads touched first, barely like an accident, but neither pulled away. June's voice trembled. "Tell me if you want me to stop." Camille shook her head in the smallest nod she had ever given in her life. June exhaled, a soft, warm breath that brushed against Camille's lips. And then the kiss happened, quiet, delicate, trembling. A careful press of lips, a pause, a deeper inhale, a gentle searching. June's hand rose to Camille's cheek, hovering first before quietly settling against her skin. Camille's fingers curled into June's sleeve, holding on without thinking. No urgency. No heat. Just the soft, breaking open tenderness of two people meeting exactly where they were scared to be. When they finally pulled apart, their faces stayed close, breaths mixing, foreheads touching again as if neither knew how to move away. Camille blinked once, slow, almost dazed. June whispered, "Are you okay?" Camille nodded, though her eyes were shiny. "I don't know what I'm doing." "That's okay," June murmured. "I do. And I won't rush you." The promise hung between them, soft as silk. But then Camille's breath hitched, not in desire but in fear. The reality of what she'd done, of what this meant, of what she had spent years denying, it crashed into her all at once. She pulled back too fast, wiping her cheek though it wasn't wet. June reached toward her instinctively but stopped halfway, hand hovering, waiting. Camille. June's voice was careful, not wounded, just concerned. Camille stood abruptly, legs unsteady. I need a minute. June rose too, giving her space. Take it. I'm not going anywhere. But Camille couldn't hear that. Not right now. Her heartbeat was too loud, too wild. She grabbed her jacket, mumbling something neither of them understood, and walked toward the exit. The hall lights cast long shadows across her path, stretching her figure thin. June didn't chase her. She just watched, hands curled at her sides, chest rising and falling with a mix of longing and worry. Camille paused at the door, back to June. She almost turned around, almost, but fear tugged stronger. She pushed the door open and stepped into the cold corridor, letting it close behind her with a soft, final thud. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything neither of them had said yet. Camille didn't sleep that night. The hotel room felt too quiet, too bright in places, too heavy in others. She kept the lamp on low, its warm glow casting long, trembling shadows across the carpet. The hum, her old symbol, the one she thought she had left behind in Boston, returned faintly in the air vent above her bed. Persistent. Soft. Like a confession she wasn't ready to hear. She pressed her palms over her eyes, trying to erase the memory of June's lips, the warmth of her hand, the honesty in her breath. But everything replayed in perfect detail. The slow pull, the gentle pause, the exact moment Camille let herself feel something she'd denied for years. And the moment she ran. She wasn't proud of that part. Morning came colder, harsher. She wrapped herself in a thick sweater and forced herself downstairs to the event hall, where the team was already bustling around, voices echoing in sharp bursts. June stood near the main display, clipboard in hand, hair tied back neatly. She looked composed, focused, except her eyes lifted the second Camille entered. Flicker, quick, searching, cautious. Camille looked away too fast. The day unfolded in a blur of instructions and last-minute changes. People moved around her, lights shifted, presentations were rehearsed, but Camille floated outside herself. Every time June walked past, she felt her whole body tighten. Every time June spoke to someone else, laughter soft and warm, Camille felt her chest tighten for another reason entirely. At one point, June approached with a stack of brochures. "Can you help me with these?" she asked, voice even. Camille nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she took the stack. They worked in silence, side by side, their shoulders nearly touching. Camille could feel the warmth radiating from June's arm, a silent presence that both soothed and terrified her. June placed a brochure down, then exhaled. "Camille, can we talk?" Camille paused, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. "Not now." "When then?" June whispered. "You ran out last night. I don't know if you regret it or if you're scared or if I did something wrong." Camille's throat tightened. "You didn't." June's eyes softened. "Then what happened?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Camille stared at the floor, at the faint shine of the tile beneath her shoes. She didn't know how to explain a lifetime of denial, of expectations, of quietly swallowing parts of herself to fit into a world that felt too narrow for her truth. She opened her mouth, but her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "Are you coming home for the holidays? We need to talk about your future." Her stomach dropped. She turned the screen face down. June saw the shift. "Someone important?" "It's nothing," Camille murmured. It didn't look like nothing. Camille swallowed. "I can't do this right now." June stepped back, not angrily but with the kind of hurt that comes from caring too deeply. "Hey, but I'm here when you're ready." By mid-afternoon, guests began arriving. The event hall glowed under soft golden lighting, the air filled with the scent of perfume, printed programs and polished leather shoes. Camille kept busy greeting clients, avoiding corners where June lingered. But avoidance was impossible. They existed in the same orbit, drawn and repelled at once. During a break, Camille slipped outside onto the terrace. The city stretched before her, lights flickering against a pale evening sky. The cold air stung her cheeks, grounding her. She leaned against the stone railing, breathing in slow, shaky breaths. Behind her, the door slid open. June stepped out, arms crossed against the wind. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold. "You disappeared again," she said softly. Camille closed her eyes. "I didn't mean to." "Then stay. At least for a minute." Camille didn't move. She couldn't. June stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, giving Camille time to walk away. But she didn't. June stopped beside her, close enough that their coats brushed. Close enough that Camille could smell the faint cedar warmth she was beginning to crave. For a long moment, they stood without speaking, listening to the distant hum of traffic below. June finally broke the silence. "I don't want to be something you regret." Camille's breath caught. "You're not. Then what are we doing?" Camille shook her head. "I don't know how to be this. I've spent years trying not to feel things like this." June's expression softened, eyes studying her gently. "I know. I can see it. But Camille, last night felt real. Didn't it?" Camille's chest ached. "Too real." June stepped half a breath closer, her voice low. "Then trust that. Not everything else. Just that moment." Camille wanted to. God, she wanted to. But the fear still coiled tight inside her. Fear of everything she couldn't control. Family expectations, old beliefs, the version of herself she might lose. "I can't hurt people," Camille whispered. "You're hurting yourself," June replied. The words landed like a soft blow. Camille's breathing grew uneven. She looked away, blinking fast. The city lights blurred. "I need time," she said. June nodded, though her eyes shimmered with something unspoken. "I can give you time. But I can't be your secret." The air stilled between them. Camille felt the weight of that truth press deep into her ribs. "I'm not asking you to hide," Camille whispered. "But you're asking me to wait in the dark with you," June replied gently. Camille's throat tightened. Her heart felt too big for her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice wouldn't come. June sighed softly, the breath clouding in the cold. "I don't want to let you go, Camille. But I can't be the only one standing on this ledge." Camille finally turned toward her. Their eyes met, raw, unprotected. June's gaze flickered with longing, fear, something like love trying to take shape. Without thinking, Camille reached out, then hesitated, hand hovering inches from June's. A trembling, unfinished gesture. June looked down at Camille's hand, then back at her eyes. "Say something. Anything." Camille swallowed a shaky breath. "I want..." Her voice faltered. "I want to choose you. I'm just not ready to lose everything else." June's eyes glistened. "Maybe you won't lose anything. Maybe you'll gain something you didn't know you needed." Camille let out a shaky laugh. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," June replied. "But it's honest." A gust of cold wind rushed between them. Camille shivered. June instinctively stepped closer, but caught herself stopping halfway. "Sorry," June murmured. "Don't be," Camille whispered. Their breath mingled in the cold, warm against the icy air. Camille felt herself tilting forward, an instinct, a want, before fear pulled her back again. The terrace door opened behind them, someone calling June's name. June didn't turn immediately. Her eyes stayed on Camille for 3 long seconds. 3 seconds Camille felt in her bones. Then June stepped away, walking back inside. Camille stood there alone, chest tight, fingertips cold. She pulled out her phone, opened a new message to June. "I don't want to lose you." Her thumb hovered. Then she deleted the words. Another message formed. "Can we talk later?" She erased that too. Finally, she typed something simple. "I'm still here." But instead of sending, she locked her phone. The screen went dark, reflecting her own conflicted expression. Behind her, the terrace lights flickered, soft, persistent, humming faintly, like the same sound that had followed her from office to hotel to heart. She took one shaky breath and stepped back inside, not fully returning, but not walking away either. A choice waiting halfway open. A door neither shut nor crossed. Yet, Camille woke before dawn, long before her alarm, long before New York began pulling itself awake. The hotel room was still and muted, touched only by a thin ribbon of early light pressing through the curtains. And there it was again, the hum. That same soft vibration from the air vent. The sound that had always unsettled her. The one tied to every version of herself she tried not to see. But this morning it felt different. Less like an accusation. More like a reminder. A call. She sat up slowly, the sheets cool around her, the air crisp against her arms. Memories of the night before swirled in her chest. June's voice on the terrace, the tremble in her own hands, the message she almost sent but didn't. The ache behind her ribs sharpened, then softened. Fear and longing were no longer separate. They had braided themselves together, pulling her toward a choice she had avoided her whole life. Her phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Not a message from June. Still, she stared at the screen for a long moment, her thumb hovering the way it had so many times last night, as if her pulse lived at the edge of that silence. By breakfast, she had rehearsed a dozen different conversations in her head. How she would approach June, what she would say, how she might apologize for running, for hesitating, for not being ready. But none of the words felt true. They sounded defensive, delicate, unfinished. And June deserved more than unfinished truths. She found June in the event hall, setting up the last of the displays. The room was bright, washed in soft gold from the overhead lights, the scent of fresh coffee lingering in the air. People moved around them, laughing, chatting, adjusting final details before the morning crowd arrived. June stood near the entrance, speaking with a vendor, her posture composed but distant. Camille recognized that distance instantly. It was the space June created when she was protecting herself. A careful shelter. Camille took a breath and approached. June. June turned. Her eyes held 1,000 quiet emotions Camille couldn't yet decipher, but the first one was clear. Caution. Hey, June said softly. Busy morning. Camille nodded, fingers curling slightly at her sides. Can we talk? June glanced around at the chaos of the room. Here? Not here, Camille whispered. Just somewhere quieter. June hesitated only a beat. Hey. They stepped out into a small service corridor behind the hall, a narrow stretch of concrete lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. The hum was louder here, steady, familiar, pulsing lightly in the air. Camille exhaled. I'm sorry for last night. June looked down at her hands, then back up. You don't have to apologize for being scared. I do, Camille said gently. Because I'm not scared of you. I'm scared of what this means. Of what it changes. June's throat worked as she swallowed. Camille, I don't want to push you into anything. But I don't want to be something you hide either. Camille stepped closer. Not touching, not reaching, just closing the space between them enough to show she wasn't running this time. I know. And I don't want you in the dark. I just didn't know how to open the door without breaking something. June's voice softened. And now? Camille took a shaky breath. Now I think that staying silent would break me more than the truth ever could. June blinked, a slow, emotional flicker. But she didn't move. This time Camille did. Her fingertips brushed June's hand. Just a whisper of contact, light as a petal landing on skin. A question. A request. June inhaled, her breath gentle but trembling. Is this okay? Camille asked, voice barely above a whisper. June nodded. Yes. Their hands found each other slowly, palms touching with a tenderness that felt almost reverent. Camille's thumb moved in small circles on June's skin, a gesture she didn't know she was capable of, not after a lifetime of holding herself at arm's length from her own truth. June stepped closer, her forehead resting lightly against Camille's temple. Not a kiss, not quite, just closeness, shared breath, a moment existing quietly between them. I'm here, June murmured. I'm not asking you to rush. I'm just asking you not to run alone. Camille's chest tightened, then eased. She turned her face slightly, feeling June's breath warm against her cheek. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I don't want to run anymore. June pulled back enough to look at her, eyes shining with a softness that made Camille's breath catch. The corridor light flickered above them, casting brief shadows across June's jawline, her lips, her eyes. Camille reached up and brushed a lock of hair behind June's ear. A delicate, deliberate touch. June leaned into it, inhaling slow, as if the gesture meant more than either of them expected. Their lips met, quietly at first, a soft blooming. Camille felt June's hand slide to the small of her back, gentle and steady, pulling her just close enough. Camille kissed her back with a truth she had been afraid of all her life. There was no urgency, only warmth, only knowing. Only the feeling of something unfolding inside her with the tenderness of a sunrise. When they broke apart, Camille didn't step away. June touched her cheek. How do you feel? Camille let her eyes close for a brief moment, letting the warmth settle. Honest. Terrified. Alive. June smiled, a soft, trembling smile. That sounds about right. A voice called from the hall. The event was about to start. They both turned toward the sound, the weight of reality settling in. Work, expectations, the world outside this narrow corridor. They all waited. June glanced at the door, then back at Camille. We don't have to define everything today. Camille nodded. But we can start today. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise etched in stone. It was a choice. A beginning. A door not fully open but no longer closed. They walked back to the hall side by side, not holding hands, but close enough that their arms brushed with every step. Inside the event space, the lights brightened, the sound of chatter filling the room. Camille felt the hum again overhead, the same gentle vibration that had followed her for years. But now, instead of feeling unsettled, she felt anchored. As if something inside her had aligned at last. Hours later, when the event ended and the last guests left, Camille stood alone under the high ceiling, watching the lights dim one by one. She felt June approach before she saw her. "You're quiet," June murmured. "I'm thinking," Camille replied, "about how much has changed, and how much hasn't." June stood beside her, their shoulders brushing gently. Change doesn't have to be a collapse. Sometimes it's just finally opening a door you've been afraid to touch. Camille smiled softly. "I think I just touched it today." June leaned in, their foreheads meeting for a brief, quiet moment, a mirror of the night they first kissed, but now calmer, warmer, grounded. They didn't need more than that. Even later, back in Boston, as Camille walked into the office on a Monday morning, the familiar fluorescent lights hummed above her desk. The same sound as always. But she didn't flinch this time. He welcomed it. The hum no longer chased her. It reflected her. June arrived a few minutes later, coat dusted with snow. She placed a coffee on Camille's desk, the same drink as before, and smiled. Camille smiled back. Not hiding. Not running. Just choosing. Some truths don't arrive all at once. They unveil themselves the moment we finally stop looking away. A soft beam of morning light touched Camille's desk, like the one from the very first day, but this time she didn't see it as a knock on a closed door. She saw it as an invitation, and she stepped toward it. What part of Camille's journey spoke to something inside your heart? If this story touched your heart, share your truth in the comments. And if this journey stayed with you, please consider subscribing to Secret Garden Stories, leaving a comment and sharing it with friends, forums, and social media. Your support helps this channel grow and build a world with more love and less prejudice. Thank you for being here.